Welcome to Bedtime Myths and Mysteries, where folklore keeps poor company with history, and history, when left alone after dark, often begins behaving very strangely indeed. Tonight, we travel to New Zealand in the first years of the 20th century, when bicycles rattled along dark roads, gas lamps burned low, and newspapers began whispering about a figure with an unfortunate talent for glowing. They called him Phosphorus Jack. A ghost, perhaps. A prankster, possibly. A man with a chemical trick and a cruel sense of theatre, almost certainly. Which is, I regret to inform you, sometimes worse. The girl did not see his face first. She saw the light. A pale smear in the darkness, low by the hedge, moving where no lantern should have been moving. Then the shape rose upright, and the glow climbed with it, shoulders, arms, a head, without features, as if the night had learned to stand. She tried to run, but the road beneath her boots had become too long, and behind her came the soft, deliberate sound of someone enjoying the chase. By the time neighbors reached her, there was no fiend, no fire, no footprint that mattered. Only a woman shaking beside the roadside, and several witnesses prepared to swear that something luminous had crossed the dark. In another story, a cyclist became the unfortunate target of public suspicion, because in a ghost scare even a man on an innocent bicycle can become a supernatural menace if he passes too quietly. The newspapers treated it with that peculiar Edwardian mixture of amusement and alarm. They laughed, of course. Then they printed the story again. Christchurch in 1905 was not some medieval village cowering beneath a ruined abbey. It was modern, or proud to think itself so. There were tram lines, shops, church bells, police reports, and newspapers briskly folding the world into columns. Yet outside the brightest streets, night still belonged to ditches, hedges, vacant lots, and the uncertain distance between one house and the next. A person walking alone after sunset could feel civilization thinning behind them, like a coat worn through at the elbows. Into that darkness stepped Jack. The reports were vague at first, which is exactly how such things prefer to enter a community. Someone had seen a glowing figure. Someone else had heard of a man shining in the road. Then the thing acquired a name, and a named fear is much easier to pass from mouth to mouth. Phosphorus Jack sounded almost comic, like a music hall villain with bad tailoring. But names are masks, and masks are rarely worn for the comfort of others. Phosphorus itself gave the legend a nasty plausibility. White phosphorus was known for its ghostly glow, a cold-looking light that seemed less like flame than infection. In the wrong hands, or even foolish hands, it could turn clothing, skin, or painted cloth into something that appeared unearthly in darkness. That may explain Jack. It does not excuse him. Chemistry, after all, has never prevented a man from being a goblin when the mood takes him. The most reliable early accounts place the scare around Christchurch, with Woolston appearing in the newspaper record as one of the named districts. Jack did not behave like a proper apparition. Proper apparitions tend to drift, moan, point tragically at walls, and then vanish with some dignity. Jack preferred pursuit. He startled people, appeared suddenly, and used his glow as a weapon, not to wound the body, but to seize the imagination by the throat. That is what makes the story linger. A ghost does not need an audience, but a hoaxer does. Jack's terror depended on witnesses, women walking home, children frightened near roads, passers-by catching just enough of a glimpse to carry the story into breakfast rooms and police stations. He was less a monster than a performance. Staged in the cheapest theatre available, the public road after dark, and the ticket price was panic. There were attempts to catch him. Naturally there were. Once a community decides that a glowing nuisance is haunting its lanes, the young men become brave in groups, which is to say, briefly. Watch parties formed, rumors sharpened, every shadow was promoted to suspect. But Jack had the advantage of all creatures who appear only at night. He could vanish simply by becoming ordinary again. A glowing fiend is terrifying. A man carrying a coat under his arm is merely late for something. The sightings did not remain neatly in one place. Newspaper references and later summaries suggest that similar scares traveled through New Zealand's public imagination, appearing in different regions and slightly altered shapes. Sometimes Jack was a glowing man. Sometimes the story leaned closer to a sheeted prankster. Sometimes he became less person than rumor, a phosphorescent itch beneath the skin of respectable society. The details changed because details always do when fear is asked to walk long distances. So what was Phosphorus Jack? The least romantic answer is also the most likely: a man, or several men, using luminous material to frighten people. The newspapers themselves often lean toward the language of masquerade rather than haunting. That matters. It places Jack not among the dead, but among that more persistent species, the living fool with too much spare time and too little conscience. Yet dismissing him as a prankster does not quite empty the story of its unease. A prank is a social wound disguised as a joke. Jack chose lonely roads, vulnerable moments, and the old human fear of being followed by something not fully seen. He understood, deliberately or not, that modern people still carry ancient instincts. Put a light in the dark, give it shoulders, let it move against reason, and civilization becomes very thin indeed. There may also have been copycats. That is the trouble with a good monster. Once invented, it becomes available. Every newspaper paragraph served as instruction as much as warning. Somewhere, someone read about the glowing fiend and thought, not how dreadful, but how effective. Thus, Jack may not have been one man at all, but a costume passed through rumor, worn by whatever idiot found the darkness convenient. Phosphorus Jack eventually faded, as such figures do. No grand unmasking has settled him neatly into the record. No final confession steps forward, hat in hand, to apologize for all the fainting, shouting, and late-night police bother. What remains is a string of newspaper notices and the shape of a man made out of light, fear, and bad intentions. History often preserves kings in marble and saints in stained glass. Occasionally, it preserves a nuisance in phosphorus. And perhaps that is why he still works. Not because we believe he was a ghost, but because we know he may have been human. A ghost can be dismissed with theology, folklore, or a stiff drink. A man who discovers how easy it is to become a monster is harder to put to rest. So, should you ever see a pale figure shining at the edge of a lonely road, do not follow it. And do not assume the dead are responsible for everything unpleasant. If this little lantern of unpleasant history has followed you home, do remember to like, subscribe, and join us again at Bedtime Myths and Mysteries. The archive is full of things that were buried, misremembered, misreported, or wisely avoided. Some of them glow, most of them should not.